everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video review, and this will be my thoughts on the second full trailer for James Gunn's Superman project, which is due for release on July the 11th 2025. And you can check out my thoughts on the preview trailer and teaser footage that were released some weeks and months ago, and I'll leave some links within the description. So let's get straight into it then, and the trailer itself, which dropped on Wednesday the 14th of May early on in the afternoon, which is around nearly 3 minutes long. And if you've watched my channel and my coverage of this movie, you'll know that I've never been convinced in the overall project. Everything from the choice of director, the inclusion of all of the secondary characters, the rumoured story, and for me, the biggest issue has always been the tone. James Gunn's vision and style and sensibilities that he so obviously is carried from his previous films, whether it be Guardians of the Galaxy, Super, or the Suicide Squad. This cartoonish, wacky, juvenile type of humour, including Peacemaker as well, has never been the right or true fit for Superman. And this trailer sadly didn't lessen any of my concerns. The more that I watch it, which has been several times now prior to making this video, all it does is practically confirm to me that this will not be the modern epic Superman movie that I want. Now, that's nothing against people who like it. If you are pleased with what you are seeing, if you are excited, if you feel it is indeed a palette cleanser from the more grim, dark tones that what we saw with the Snyder version, then more power to you. I will never ever try to take anything away from people who enjoy this trailer, but it simply isn't for me. But we'll go through the trailer itself then and the newer elements, and probably the scene that David Corenswet convinced the most was the practice interview scene that we see with Lois Lane in the apartment. And we're dealing with a story where Lois knows his identity at this point, so how that will play out will be, I suppose, very interesting for a Superman movie. And this scene has played out post the events of Superman assumedly saving people, and there's been some sense of large collateral damage as a result. And essentially Lois is preparing him from the media backlash from his hero saving antics, and we see and hear those lines that the secretary is looking into his activities, how there's been a mixed public perception to his overall existence. So once more we're going into this whole passage of play of the public not being convinced by Superman, being skeptical and unconvinced of him, very cliched and tired, and of course we've already gone through that with the Snyder films. Though I would admit that Corenswet actually looked better as Superman when he's actually sitting here in the white t-shirt and jeans. Here, especially in the opening lines, he actually speaks of a bit more conviction and a bit more intent. Again, looking far more like a Superman than what we actually see when he's in the costume, which is still wrong. 3 trailers or footage, whatever you want to call it now, in terms of live action and the costume is still all wrong. I've already analysed it in previous videos, and nothing that I've seen within this live trailer has convinced me otherwise. It's just all wrong. It doesn't do him any favours. When we see Superman in the flying sequences or the fighting scenes, I just truly believe that had you given Corenswet a better costume, he would have looked far more better and given the film, I believe, far more conviction. Again, you can go online and you'll see various mock-ups of Corenswet in a much more classical aesthetic of the costume, and he does indeed look like a more convincing Superman, but that isn't the case with this overall film. But I have been saying since day one also that Rachel Brosnahan is going to be at the very least a very solid Lois Lane, and likely the best element, or at least the best character, and probably the best performance throughout the entire film. Again, that could be wrong when I go to see it, but she is the one element that I don't have any doubts whatsoever. Now, I have seen some people state that it would have been nice to see Lois in maybe much more of a glamorous outfit. Here we just see her very much of a dressed down attire as she's interviewing Superman, much more in these flat shoes and these almost like baggy trousers, far and away from the tight waistcoat and the tight skirt and the high heels that what we saw particularly modelled by Terry Hatcher in the 90s Superman series. But maybe that will change when we see the overall film. But again, no doubt about it, Rachel Brosnahan, I believe, is going to be the best part of this movie. We then had multiple scenes of Superman being apprehended by Lex's troops. In particular, we see the female coated all in black, this kind of nanotech type of suit. This character is known as the Engineer, who is part of the Authority, who we all know James Gunn is so eager to push within his DC universe. Again, I'm not sure why. It also would have been much better if we could have had much more of a famous Superman antagonist, rather than somebody who is completely unknown for very much of these Z-list characters known as the Authority. But again, this is the James Gunn preference and style, that he prefers much more these outlandish misfit type of characters rather than the classical ones that we all know. But we do ask the question when we see these scenes here as to whether this Superman that's being dragged around, pushed down to the floor, is an actual Superman clone. Again, if we go by the various rumoured stories, if it is to be true, there's going to be some sort of cloning or alternate universe or alternate version of Superman. And is this the version that we see here in these scenes that Lex is using here to try and manipulate the public? We see later on that Lex has somehow been able to locate the fortress. How early or late this happens within the film, I would say probably at least halfway through. Is this where he actually clones Superman's data in order to develop the alternate version? Is this how he goes on to discover kryptonite? And we see that latest scene where Superman is being battered down and locked in a cell by the soldiers, who it looks like they're using some sort of kryptonite fueled batons to beat him down. We see him standing alongside Metamorpho in a cell. Is this part of Lex's initiative to capture these superpowered beings and trying to use them for his own agenda? How has Lex been able to imprison Superman, and how does Superman escape? We have that scene that we've seen previously when he punches out of the glass cell. Is that part of him freeing himself? We will wait and see overall. But again, for me, there are too many scenes of Superman being beaten down, roughed up, broken down, falling into the ground. Now, there will be people that like this because they go into that typical argument of trying to show Superman as being more flawed and more vulnerable and more relatable. Now, I'm not saying Superman has to look perfect in every single shot, but once more, I want a Superman that really has that sense of awe and that sense of conviction and invincibility about him. A Superman that truly captivates your attention, and sadly, this isn't it. We then look at what was easily the worst effect shots of the trailer, and that was the kaiju-like monster that we've seen in previous footage that Superman fights against, and it still looks really cheap and still unfinished. Almost has this plasticine-like feel, again, whether that's deliberate on the whole style and tone and visual aesthetic of James Gunn. But when you see especially how convincing the likes of Godzilla has looked in all of the movies in the modern day era, the likes of King Kong as well, that's the standard that I would expect to see if you are going to have this big kaiju monster that Superman fights. I don't really like that in many ways. I think that's going too far into the cartoony, almost cosmic like sensibilities, but this is James Gunn. So again, I wasn't very convinced by this overall effect shot. Now, one surprise is that it does look like we'll have both Parr and Martha Kent alive and well, which I believe is actually a first for a Superman movie or Superman movie of recent times. And that's fine, that's fair enough. No issues with that whatsoever. Now, what doesn't look as fine is still the supporting cast of the heroes, whether it's Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific. We again have more airborne shots of them, and it just again has that really cheap and plastic feel. Again, I understand and appreciate the more brighter tone and colours infused with this movie. I think that was a necessary step after what we saw with Zack Snyder's movies. But there has to be a balance, and I think if you go too far, it doesn't look as convincing. These characters shouldn't be here. Hopefully they'll be in a small limited capacity, but again, for a Superman movie, your first one within your new chapter, they just shouldn't be involved at all, as with the same as Metamorpho also. And that's it really, I believe. In terms of this overall trailer, we just had more clips again of Superman flying in the air, looking up. That phrase has been heavily used within the marketing, as is with all of the sequences with Crypto. Again, another sign, I believe, of James Gunn going too far into the more comic book sensibilities. Fine if you want to have Crypto in a scene or two, no worries, but having him in what almost seems like a fairly prominent figure within this movie, for me, just doesn't work and undercuts the seriousness that I do believe that you need to have with a Superman movie. Yes, it has to be fun and bright, and there has to be a heart and charm. I understand that, but again, if you go too far, then it takes away all of the credibility. This is certainly what we saw with, at the very least, Superman 3, where after the first two, which did manage to find that balance, the Richard Donner movies, the third film went too far, and overall, that's what I believe is going to happen with this project here. I think overall, it's going to be a decent, if not disposable, throwaway Superman movie. It'll be bright, it'll be colourful, it will be very family friendly, which is good. I think there'll be nothing wrong with the performances, but overall, I just think that this is not going to be what I hoped it to be. It's not going to have that same verve, that same drive, that same excitement. It's too cartoony. It's too light. It's too much of that bubblegum, comic pop, disposable aesthetic. This is what James Gunn does. This is again much attuned to James Gunn's style and sensibility, but I do feel again that it's all wrong for Superman. But I really hope that I'm proved to be wrong when the film does release on July the 11th. So that's my overall thoughts and feelings then on the second and presumably final trailer for James Gunn's Superman project. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other further movies, thoughts, or television series, or any other issues within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, then also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.